So, hi and welcome to Poetry Passages. I'm Clifford Rames, and I am so thrilled to be here today with my very special guest, the great Jack Ridl. Hi, Jack.
Good morning, Clifford.
Good
This is a
morning.
joy, and you've already made me blush and want to run from the room.
Oh, I'm blushing too. Woo. Well, Jack is a poet originally from Pennsylvania, right?
Right?
The son of a Hall of Fame inducted college basketball coach.
Yeah.
He's a retired English professor who currently lives on the shores of Lake Michigan. Jack's poetry has appeared in numerous journals, including Poetry, Plowshares, Poetry East, and most recently, Rattle magazine. Hope College has named Jack its Visiting Writers Series, has named its Visitor Writers Series after him. He is the author of 8 poetry collections. Is that right? About 8?
hmm
Yeah.
hmm
The most recent of which is St. Peter and the Goldfinch,
Yeah.
published in 2019 by Wayne State University. Jack, I've been such a huge fan for so long, and this is such a thrill. Thank you so much for coming on the program and welcome.
Well, it's a joy for me. I mean, it's a humbling joy, for heaven's
Oh.
sake. You grow up thinking, nobody will notice you unless you put a beacon on your bike or something. And
And the
all of a
baseball
sudden,
cards on
here
your
you
wheels,
are.
right? Well,
Joy.
so I'm curious. Tell us, why did you become a poet instead of a basketball coach like your dad?
Yes, that's right. And the women's basketball coach at the little college here, has won 50 some games in a
Oh,
row.
wow.
And I had him, he was a student in my freshman comp class, and his father was a coach. And all he wanted to be was a coach when he left school. And I said, all I want to be is not a coach when I left school, because I knew I could not handle all that. After you lost, why did you lose? And
Yeah.
headlines in the paper. And I used to kid people, but I was serious, when I was in elementary school and you'd read about your father screwing up the ball game the night before. I always wanted my classmates to have their fathers, like car salesman messes up deal at end of day, that kind of, why isn't that in the paper? But
Right, right, right.
so why did I become a poet? Well, at first I became a songwriter, believe it or not,
Oh,
out of
wow.
college. I just, for the same, at that time of your age, I guess that was just a hot thing. And I thought I could do that. And then there's a wonderful poet, Lee Young Lee, and I wrote songs for his sister. And then one time she came to rehearsals and she said she was getting married, and I said that's wonderful. And then she said, but that means I don't sing anymore except for children, any children that we have. So the whole songwriting thing blew up, and I had the naive idea that, well, if I wrote songs, I could certainly write poems. I just eliminate the music and
Right,
nothing
right.
to it. And
So there aren't any Jack Riddell standards out there that we're
no,
missing out
just,
on?
no, Paul Simon did not feel threatened at
No
all.
Barry Manilow covers.
No covers, and Paul did just fine without me. Uh, and then I was introduced to a poet in Pittsburgh named Paul Zimmer, and I asked him what he thought of my poems and would he help me out. And he looked at about 5 of them, and I had, a stack. And he looked at about 5, and he said, "Yeah, I'll help you out." He said, "But we're going to need to start all over again."
Mm. Oh.
So I learned very quickly that I was not writing poems.
Mm.
And so I worked with Paul. His thing was, I'll tell you when you've written a poem.
Oh.
And two
Well,
and a
that's
half
helpful.
years, yeah. And he gave me feedback, but he never said you'd written a poem. And then 2.5 years later, I brought a poem in and he looked at it and he said,
Bingo.
you did it. You did
Excellent.
it. So that was a long apprenticeship. And I owe that stick to itiveness to being a coach's son. You don't quit. That's the only thing I
Yeah.
think I got out of it.
The
That and liking
tenacity.
to practice, you know. So
Wow.
that's how it really, really did start. And then I just kept at it, just like
Good.
any coach's kid does. They don't quit. So yeah,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
just been at it for 50 years now. So
Cool. Well, the
yeah,
world probably has enough coaches, and we probably need more poets. So I'm
I
glad.
think
I'm
so.
glad
I
you made
think
that
so.
decision.
Yeah, yeah. My father, there's a wonderful story about my dad when he was interviewed by Sports Illustrated. One of the questions was, "Well, this is weird. Your son's a poet."
Hmm.
And my dad said, "No, that's not weird. He writes about human experience. That's not sound doesn't make." I'll tell you what's weird. I dress these guys up in these little uniforms, and they try to put a ball through a ring, and then they try to stop these other guys from put. Now that's really weird," he said. And my goodness, the Sports Illustrated guy's eyes got like
I
this.
bet.
You
Yeah.
know, I never realized that. You know, it's kind of a surrealistic moment for that guy.
Wow.
But
So
God bless Dad for that.
God bless that. Well, so how often do you write these days? Do you write every day, or do you write just when the muse
I
strikes, or when
here's how
something inspires you?
it yeah it's I've been at this so long that the only way I can really answer that is similar to learning a language. I think
Hmm.
in poems every day.
Wow, what a blessing.
Whether I go to the to the paper or not is another thing. But it's
Hmm.
similar to when you learn a language and all of a sudden you wake up one morning and go, "Oh my gosh, my brain's going in German,"
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
my brain just goes in poem. That doesn't mean they all are effective. It just means that that's my way of seeing things. I
Right.
just see things that way all the time now.
Well, it's a
So
wonderful way of seeing things, I
so
think.
then it's just a matter of it's not that it's easy, but I mean, I sit down and see what happens, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
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 Well, these last 2 years have changed the world so profoundly in
Uh,
ways we probably can't fully understand yet.
no.
So how has the pandemic altered the way you look at and the way you write poetry?
Um, well, I'm pretty hermetic kind of guy,
Hmm.
so that hasn't had any effect on
Yeah.
being introspective or any of that kind of pretentious thing.
Mm.
but um, but it has intensified the realization of how important community is, I think, for me. And and we need community, and we need it now more than ever. And and people like yourself have created community, and that's been fascinating to see, and something to be very grateful for all of us for. It's a Zoom community, but it's been remarkable at how fast it's
Right.
become humane. And
Right.
for me, you're sitting here with me here, or I'm sitting in your wonderful place there. So
Yeah.
it doesn't feel technological to me. It feels like I'm here with Clifford.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I don't know the numbers or any of that, but it's just observation. I really feel like during the pandemic, and then maybe as a result of the pandemic, poetry has really taken off. And I also write haiku, and I'm a member of some haiku groups, and
Oh, good.
people are really just signing up and finding they need ways to express themselves during this time, and
Very
poetry
much.
seems to be the way to go,
Very,
which is
very,
kind
very much.
of
There's an interview in the latest magazine, Rattle, with a fellow who has really studied the need for writing poetry for in relation to any kind of trauma, and that the studies
him.
show, he's shocked by how important it is.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting back to the sensibility or the what I've always sort of quote unquote struggled for, fought for, spoken for, and
Hmm.
that is to deprofessionalize the arts. I think they
Hmm.
belong to everybody.
Yes.
And if we were in an indigenous culture, we'd all be making pots and painting paintings and dancing, and we've professionalized.
Hmm.
So we have all kinds of people say, "I can't write, I can't draw a straight line," all those cliches. And I just want them for everybody. The effectiveness, whether it's an effective poem or painting or whatever is one thing, but what happens during
Sure.
the writing of that haiku and
Right.
how that connects you in a new way to the world is just so important.
Yeah. I
So
heard Amanda Gorman say yesterday on a poetry broadcast that one of the problems she finds with the current education system is that poetry is taught mostly in isolation. It's like literature, literature, literature. Okay, here's your one poetry course or your one poem. Let's move on to the rest of literature. And poetry has a broader, more global sort of place in the world. And
so much so.
Yeah.
And it's not the same as story. It's not the same as novel.
Right.
It is really another art form. And
It
then
is.
it gets locked into that other that she's talking about.
Right.
You need to pull it out.
So just this week, you published a brand new poem
Right?
about the recent school shootings called The Last Day in November. It's such a painfully powerful, thought-provoking, and soul-searing poem. Can you tell us about it and the response that you've gotten to it?
Well, the response has been remarkable. The editor of Rattle that took the poem to put on their Poets Respond and then on their Rattlecast said that it's really been the most read and the most shared poem they've had all year.
Congratulations.
And how it came about was my wife was at the spinning wheel, which she is at a lot every day. If she's not out dyeing the fleece in the garage, which we call the barn. And it just hit me so hard. Also, our daughter is a high school art teacher, and she's vulnerable to the entryway. And it just hit me as we live in a time where what doesn't belong together has collided.
Yeah.
And we can't pull them apart. And so that's what got me going. You know, I said to myself, well, I could write about the school shootings. I have no right to really do that. I can't enter the experience of suffering. Who am I to do that? But I can recognize those of us who weren't there and the impact externally on us internally, and then the juxtaposition of that with what we really want to do. I think there's one moment that illustrates that in the poem, and that's where I go to the character, the lead, it goes to trim the Christmas tree. And it struck me that that's what came out, as opposed to, there's no way I'm going to trim the Christmas tree. He goes ahead and trims the Christmas tree.
Right.
And
So would you like to read the poem for us?
I'm
that would be so great.
Delighted. The last day of November. My wife is at her spinning wheel. She first cleans, dries, and combs the fleece, then dyes the wool. She will spin yarn to make a shawl, stocking cap, socks. She disappears into her gentle quiet. I am a third of the way through reading 4 books, but I don't want to read any of them. I want what I know you want. To be happy, actually happy, to love in a happy world. Today, there was yet another school shooting. Some students felt it coming. 3 kids who thought they were grown up, dead. One more thought likely to die, hid. The others will live. The news dares to say, recover. Tonight we played Christmas carols for the first time this season. Yes, 'tis the season. This morning, surgeons at 3 different hospitals awakened, assuming yet another routine day of rounds and operations. When they were 17, did they imagine Advent would offer them the impossibility of saving the assumption of a future? that they would never again be able to say, Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, without being caught in an ambush of memory. Tonight, thousands of parents will be unable to sleep, nor tomorrow, nor on into ever. Teachers who each day hope it will not, cannot happen again, will think again about construction or an office job. And guns, they will sleep in the garage, a cabinet on the top shelf. They will rest and be at the ready. No, I don't want to read. I don't want to hear again about God's mercy, the peace that comes from above, or meditation, Calvin's endlessly facile legacy of blame, the need for prayer and legislation. I'm tired of pursuing happiness. I want to breathe it in as ubiquitous as air. And while we're at it, I want the curriculum revised to teach sentimentality, that it is not any more false feeling than the unguarded synapses in the shooter's brain. Scholars, put away the safety of secondary sources. Sit with your students. Abandon the inhumane hideaway of objective distance. Throw open your hearts. Let sentiment break our shielded souls before another rifle and surgeon's words have to. My wife never asks for the meaning. She sits in silence at her wheel, twisting a lamb's wool into yarn to knit whatever it takes to keep another warm. Our dog is asleep, head on his paws. The twin sister cats curl together. I'm not going to pick up my books. I'm going to begin to trim the tree, wondering how many 5-year-olds will sit on Santa's lap. And when he asks, what do you want for Christmas? We'll answer, a gun.
Ooh. That last line is such a gut puncher.
Yeah.
But my favorite line is, I want happiness to be as ubiquitous as air. Happiness and kindness and gratitude. All these things we shouldn't have to search for them, right?
That's right. No, I've been saying that since I was little. Yeah.
Wow, you really hit the mark with that poem. Thank you, Jack, for reading.
Thank you.
It just seemed to pour out of your heart, that poem. Do you find yourself lately compelled to reach deep inside the well of your soul to write response poems? Do you find that happening a lot lately?
I think I've always started. People ask, how do you start a poem? And I've always started with a title. In fact, I sort of walk through my day just titling things, So it would be like after spending the morning with Clifford Rames would be the title,
Is that the songwriter in you? Kind of.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then off the poem I go. It's wherever it goes. But reaching deep, I think that part's always been there. I remember as a kid reaching deep by staring out the window and feeling my parents' father, especially his hand hitting my head saying, get back here, get back here.
You want to lose your head?
Yeah. And so, the influence of that was that our daughter was allowed stare time. When we saw her looking out that window, we knew not to do get back here.
She's traveling somewhere.
Yeah, she's gone. She's gone. Let her go.
Well, you have another Santa wish list poem.
Yeah.
One that is a bit less ominous, I would say.
Yes, right.
It's called A Christmas List for Santa, and it comes out of practicing to walk like a heron, I believe, right?
That's right. With your haiku, you might notice that
anything with heron catches my eye.
Well, there's a Zen koan in in this title because no matter how much you practice, you can never walk like a heron because their knees go the other way.
Exactly.
So yeah, I got a kick out of just having a little Zen cone on the. You can see the Zen master say, "Go walk like a heron."
Right. Just try.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
I'm kind of curious. Well, as people will see, it's a list of things for Santa. But I'm kind of curious, if you were to write that poem today, how different would it be?
I think the wish, the deepest wish, would be that we overcome this divisive stuff and the misinformation, the things that aren't true. I don't like living. Well, that sounds so silly. Who does? But the living, swimming your way amidst all this misinformation, lies, painful cruelty, etc., I think would be embedded in that list. Some of the things would remain, I think, as they are, but that part would be in there. That and the pandemic, I think, would be in there. I wish would be Christmas list for Santa that I can go next door and have hot chocolate with my neighbor, or bourbon over ice,
or both.
Yeah.
Oh, great! Can you read that? Can
Okay.
you read that poem for us?
Sure will. Thank you. A Christmas list for Santa. A Wednesday afternoon with no thought of Thursday. 3 weeks in the woods with my father. My father. Cups of tea, plates of sugar cookies, the first ones I ever made, the dough still sticking to my fingertips. Comic books in the late 40s, Little Lulu, The Green Hornet, Felix the Cat. Every creek from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The last page from 20 unpublished novels. The ease of a dog's sleep. 5 gold rings. A moon-draped evening among the birds in the hemlocks. Any snow-covered pile of leaves. Photographs, I don't care how many, of my daughter just before she smiles for the camera. 7 moments with the lucidity of cutting yourself with a bread knife. Whatever happens between what happens. And the liturgy of an old monk laughing.
Bravo. Wonderful.
Yeah, I love that poem. I have to say, I like the poem because I like those things,
Yeah.
It's not this, I like those things.
Well, throughout a lot of your poetry, you write often of your father and your grandfather. Your poem Hands, which I read way back in episode 19, is about your granddad. So as you grow older yourself, do you feel your connection to your father and grandfather deepening, growing closer, or more distant?
What a remarkable question. That's really prescient on your part, because that's true. I think they're with me more than they've ever been.
Yeah.
I've on the humorous side, I've overcome not becoming the all-American point guard I was probably supposed to be, and
still time.
and overcome realizing that both my parents really couldn't enter my world. They just really couldn't. And so there was a lot of, back then it would be neglect. Now it's more understanding that it wasn't neglect. It was, they didn't have a way into their kids' stair time and his poetic sensibility. So yeah, they're really here. And boy, when I get out the Christmas stuff, Grandpa's back and my dad's back, and I love having them around. I went through some photographs the other day, and I don't know what that is. It's fascinating, but there is a presence. That's all I can say. I know when my father passed away, I told people that a little bit of me left and a lot of him stayed. And that's that's wonderful. So I'm watching a ball game with him.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
over there and I'm here, and his dad is there too, my grandpa.
I
So
think it's a mistake to think of the dead as gone. I mean, they're there always in
oh
ways that
yeah.
can teach us things about our own lives and about how to live.
Tell me about that for you. Tell me a little. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well,
That's just
I'm
a little bit.
fortunate that both of my parents are still alive, but my grandmother, who I was very close with, is gone, and I 2 years ago lost my very beloved little doggy, Smokey, who's up there in the wall behind me, watching
Okay.
over me.
Yeah.
I
Good.
feel her presence, and I felt her presence in such profound ways right after she passed, and ever since. And my grandmother too, who I talk to frequently. Um, yeah, I think, they're not gone. We can learn from them, and they're there to teach us, and we should listen.
Yeah. I have
um,
ornaments for my grandmother, so they're 100 and some years old. And
oh,
in some ways, uh, we lived with my mother's mother, my grandmother, and she really was the major influence on me. Where my parents didn't understand, for some reason she did, and she would read to me all the time.
mm,
And that's where those comic books from the 40s come from.
yeah, yeah.
Grandma would put me on her lap and read to me about Felix the cat,
Oh, wow, how
So
wonderful.
that's where that line just simply comes from Grandma.
Great memories.
And
Yeah,
I still feel her laugh. Isn't that?
yeah,
I mean, I
yep,
do
yep.
really do.
I can hear my grandmother too, and glass of vodka tonic in her hand, and
That's it.
saying,
That's
"Where's the
it.
next party? Let's go."
Let's go. I had another
She was a
grandmother.
firecracker.
Oh, that is great. My other grandmother was that. She lived to
Yeah.
102, and whenever she was asked, "How do you live that so long?" she said, "Manhattan at breakfast, Manhattan at lunch, Manhattan at dinner." That's what she
Wonderful.
said. Yeah, I love those firecracker people. And my grandmother, it was always cream sherry, cream sherry. She
Cream
was British,
sherry, yes.
and she would have tea at 4 and then cream sherry.
In the little glass, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we get a really poignant glimpse of your grandfather and his life in your poem "Christmas at My Grandfather's."
Thank you.
From that one comes out of Poems from the Same Ghost and Between.
My goodness, how did you get a hold of that?
It's
That's
I
really
had to
remarkable.
have it, so I hunted it down.
My gosh, that's a long time ago.
Yeah. So, in the time of your grandfather, it was hard living, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. That's
Yeah.
right. He was such. Well, they say Bohemia. There was Bohemia at that time. The family. The easy way for people to understand is to say I'm Czech. That Riddle was HRIDL when they came came to the States, and they lopped the H off on Ellis Island, and then became immigrant workers. And it was my father's really job to get the family out of the mills and out of the factories by going to college, and which is what he did. And then his kid never left college. So we went from the factories to never leaving college, and that's pretty good.
Oh,
Yeah, in a generation or two, that's not too bad.
that's wonderful.
But he was remarkable. And in that other poem that you mentioned, when I asked Grandpa, he'd worked on that line. He lied about his age when he was 16, so he could work in the factories. And I asked him one time, "Grandpa, how did you do that all those years, day after day, the same assembly line, on it?" And he said, "Well, what do you mean? It was only 8 hours a day." I mean, that's just astonishing. I could never feel sorry for myself as I was reading a student paper that I read, 20 times in the past. No. I always remember, Grandpa, it's only 8 hours a day. And
another example of the dead having something to teach.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Beautiful.
Right. Yeah. Well, shall I read that?
Please, I would love it. Thank you.
Christmas at my grandfather's. The dark stab of pre-dawn stings my grandfather's wrists. He grabs his lunch pail. The mill still burns, one shift moving into the next. Men held to the air by hunger. Home. The unremittent threat of sudden illness, and the nag of hope that one kid might get out. At Christmas, I remember only the gift of the day off, watching my grandfather get up at the same time, dress, and turn the tree lights on. He'd sit in the dark, stare at the tree, drift into the branches, let his mind take its place among the ornaments. As behind him, over his shoulder, the sun came up through the window, smudged with soot and spray on snow.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
It's creating the winter wonderland within the house.
Yeah, within the working class house.
In the working class house, yeah, the sooted windows, yeah, from them. But your poems are so soulful. There's just so much tenderness, wisdom, compassion, and there's a sensitivity to the pain and wonder of being alive, and a sort of nostalgia for the simpler life and the joys found in the small things.
I appreciate that so much. They're
dogs. Your poems have lots of dogs.
Lots of dogs. In fact, in the last book, I said to the editor, I think there's too many dogs, too much coffee, and too many plants. And she said, no, that's you. We're leaving them all in.
No, never enough dogs. We love dogs.
We love dogs. Right.
Well, in all seriousness, I think the world could really use a Jack Ridl collection of dog poems. Any chance of that?
You're going to get me on it. I
get you.
Our wonderfully dear, sweet. I say she's kind. We have a Italiano Spanone, and she's so sweet and kind.
Vivi, right? Vivi.
Vivi is kind.
You have Vivi on your mug, and I have my two rascals on my mug.
Look at that. You do, don't you? Oh, that's great.
Bandit and Lola. They say hi to Vivi.
Rascals is the word. A word of endearment, really. Yeah, I know.
So,
I know if I turn.
So what's next, other than the dog collection? What's next for you? Anything new coming up?
I don't really know, because I had the unfortunate news that my editor has retired. So I don't know if there's another book or not. I there's a side of me that says, as old as I am, that don't take up a space for somebody younger. And then there's people who are saying, do you have enough poems? And I say, actually, yes, since Goldfinch, I probably have another book of poems. And so going back and forth on this next year will tell me whether to send it to some new places and see if they're interested. I hope they are, but
I'm sure there will be.
When I hear, I really say this sincerely, I'm just me. That's it. And when I hear that has touched somebody else through the poems, well, I get verklempt. Yeah, because I just can't imagine the coach's kid would ever have that happen. Yeah.
Well, you have read some new poems recently, and just to wrap up, I wanted to let everybody know that you do a Facebook Live reading every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. And you have read some new poems there. Even the one that premiered on Rattle was premiered first on your Facebook Live.
That's right.
So if you want to get on the cutting edge of everything Jack Ridl, watch his Facebook Live every Thursday. And I just love the way you always sign off your broadcast with two lovely words: be kind.
Be kind.
What else is there to say?
I don't know.
Kindness. Yeah,
that came from the first job out of college. I was at Colgate University, and I asked the dean that I was working for, when you were little, what did you say you wanted to be when you grew up? And he said, kind.
Yeah. It's that wonderful line from the movie Harvey. Have you seen Harvey?
Yeah, I love
Stewart.
Yeah.
There are two types of people in this world.
Right.
I choose to be pleasant.
I choose to be pleasant. Yeah. Well, you do. You certainly embody that.
You as well. You as well, Jack.
I'm so grateful.
Me too.
Really. Well, doesn't it help us with this? We'd never know each other. And what I mean by it is, I know you're out there, and that matters to me. And I want you to know that.
Me
I
too.
really,
Thank you.
it does matter.
Likewise, I'm so grateful for you and the time you spent here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you'll come back and visit again. You're always welcome.
Let's see you. And I'll look for the notifications now that I know what I'm doing.
Right.
So tech dumb.
Right. Well, that's it for us. Thanks so much
care.
to Jack, and thanks to everybody for watching. Stay well, stay safe, be kind, and we'll see you next time right here on Poetry Passages. Bye.
Bye-bye.